The girl kneeled in the dust with her wrists bound behind her back. The council circle pressed around her like a noose. 12 elders sat cross-legged on deer hides, their faces carved from stone and patience. Warriors lined the outer ring, arms folded, eyes hard. The fire pit in the center sat cold and unlit. That detail mattered. When the Comanche held council without fire, judgment would be swift and final. She kept her eyes on the ground, not from shame, from survival. She had learned years ago that meeting their gaze only fed their contempt. Let them see what they wanted to see. A traitor. A liability. The white girl who had cost them blood. The eldest council member, a man called Broken Bow for the weapon that saved his life in his youth, raised one weathered hand. The murmurs died. 3 winters have passed since the raid on the fort supply line, he said, his voice carrying across the circle without effort. 3 winters since we lost 4 warriors in an ambush. 3 winters since this one, he gestured toward her without looking, was accused of exposing our position to the bluecoats. She didn't flinch. She had heard this recitation before, in whispers behind her back, in the silences that followed her through camp, in the way mothers pulled their children away when she passed. The council has debated her fate, Broken Bow continued. Some say she should have been driven out that night. Some say blood requires blood. But our laws are clear. The one who brought the accusation must render judgment. The girl's heartbeat stumbled. She knew what was coming. She had known for days, since the summons to council had been delivered by a tight-lipped warrior who wouldn't speak her name. "Red Hawk," Broken Bow called. "Step forward." He emerged from the ring of warriors like a shadow detaching from darkness. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the controlled grace of a man who had been trained to kill since childhood. He was younger than most of the elders, perhaps 25 winters, but he carried himself with the weight of someone much older. War did that. Leadership did that. Refusing to look at another human being for 3 years did that too. She felt him stop 3 paces away. She felt the weight of his presence, the space where his gaze should have landed, but didn't. He had perfected the art of looking through her, past her, around her, never at her. "Red Hawk," Broken Bow said, "you are the one who survived the ambush and returned with the story. You told us the bluecoats knew our route, knew our numbers, knew when we would strike. You said only one person outside our raiding party had knowledge of the plan." "I spoke truth," Red Hawk said. His voice was low and level, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. "She worked in the fort before we took her during the river crossing raid. She knew their routines. She knew their language. The bluecoats were waiting for us exactly where we planned to attack." "And you believe she told them," Broken Bow stated. "I believe the facts." The girl bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. The facts. He believed a story he had told himself until it became stone, and she had let him. That was the part that would confuse anyone watching this scene. She had never defended herself. Not once. Not when he first made the accusation, his face spattered with the blood of his dead friends, his voice raw with grief and rage. Not when the council questioned her. Not in the 3 years since. "Then you will judge her," Broken Bow said. "The council places her fate in your hands. You may demand her exile. You may demand her death. You may grant her freedom. Though we doubt you will show such mercy to a traitor. Choose." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush bone. The girl waited. She had become skilled at waiting. "I do not need time to consider," Red Hawk said. "My judgment stands as it stood 3 winters ago. She is a traitor. She has Comanche blood on her hands. The penalty for betrayal is death or permanent exile. I choose exile. At dawn, she will be given water and 1 day's food. She will be taken to the borderlands and released. If she returns, she will be killed on sight." His voice never wavered. He delivered the sentence the way a man might describe the weather. The girl closed her eyes. Exile to the borderlands meant death, just slower. The Comanche territory sat surrounded by hostile tribes, blue-coat patrols, and land so harsh it killed the unprepared within days. A lone white woman with no weapons, no horse, no allies. She would be dead before the week ended. But that wasn't the part that cut. The part that cut was this. He still hadn't looked at her. He had just condemned her to death, and he couldn't even meet her eyes. "It is decided," Broken Bow announced. "At first light, the sentence will be carried out." The council began to rise. Warriors started to disperse. The girl's bound hands went numb. She had known this was coming. She had prepared herself, but preparation and acceptance were different animals. "Wait!" The voice came from the edge of the circle. An older warrior named Stone Hand, one of the council members who rarely spoke. He had survived more battles than most men saw in a lifetime, and he had a scar across his throat that made his voice sound like rocks grinding together. "I have a question," Stone Hand said, not rising from his seat. "For Red Hawk." Every eye turned. Questions during judgment were uncommon. The protocol was clear. Accuser presents facts. Counsel deliberates. Accuser renders verdict. But Stone Hand was respected, and respect bought latitude. "Ask," Red Hawk said. "The ambush happened at Twin Springs. You said the Bluecoats knew your route, your numbers, your timing." "Yes. But the route to Twin Springs was not the original route." For the first time, something flickered across Red Hawk's face. Not quite surprise, more like recognition of danger. "Explain," Broken Bow said, leaning forward. Stone Hand's scarred voice carried across the circle. "The original plan, as I recall from the council meeting before the raid, was to strike the supply line at Three Sisters Canyon. Twin Springs was the secondary route, to be used only if the first position was compromised." "That's correct," Red Hawk said carefully. "So if the girl told the Bluecoats about the raid before you departed," Stone Hand continued, his tone conversational, almost friendly, "she would have told them about Three Sisters Canyon, because she would not have known about Twin Springs. Only the raiding party knew about the secondary route. It was decided after you left." The silence that followed was different, sharper. The girl felt the change in the air, the subtle shift of attention. She didn't dare lift her eyes. "Perhaps she learned of it," Red Hawk said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "How?" Stone Hand asked. "The raiding party left before dawn. You traveled for 2 days. When did she speak to the Bluecoats? When did they have time to reposition their ambush from Three Sisters to Twin Springs? A half-day's ride away?" "I don't know," Red Hawk admitted. "Neither do I," Stone Hand said. "Which is why I have always found this accusation strange. The facts, as you call them, don't align." The girl's pulse hammered in her throat. Stone Hand had never spoken up before. In 3 years, he had watched in silence during every council session, every whispered conversation, every cold glance thrown her way. Why now? "Are you saying she is innocent?" someone asked from the crowd. "I'm saying the facts don't align," Stone Hand repeated. "And facts that don't align usually mean someone hasn't asked the right questions." Broken Bow looked at Red Hawk. "Do you have an explanation for how the Bluecoats knew about Twin Springs?" "War is chaos," Red Hawk said. "Perhaps they had scouts. Perhaps they anticipated the secondary route." "Perhaps," Stone Hand agreed. "Or perhaps the person who exposed the position was not the girl." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. Warriors shifted. Elders exchanged glances. The girl finally, carefully, lifted her eyes just enough to see Red Hawk's face. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His hands, hanging loose at his sides, had curled into fists. He still wasn't looking at her, but for the first time in 3 years, she saw doubt in his posture. "This council is adjourned," Broken Bow said abruptly. "We will reconvene tomorrow at midday. Red Hawk, you will prepare to answer Stonehand's questions in detail. The girl will remain under watch until then." They hauled her to her feet and led her to the small wickiup at the edge of camp where she had lived for 3 years. A guard was posted outside. She sat on the hard dirt floor, wrists still bound, and stared at the wall. Stonehand's questions echoed in her head. The old warrior had just cracked open the door to the truth, but the truth was a dangerous thing. The truth would not set her free. The truth would destroy Red Hawk, and destroying Red Hawk would fracture the tribe at a time when they couldn't afford fractures. That's why she had stayed silent. That's why she had let them call her traitor, because the alternative was worse. She leaned back against the hide wall and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, Red Hawk would have to make a choice, and she already knew which choice he would make. He would choose the tribe. He would choose his honor. He would choose the story that protected him, just like he had chosen 3 years ago. Because that's what leaders did. They survived. She had just never expected survival to look so much like cowardice. The guard changed at midnight. She heard the quiet exchange of words outside, the rustle of footsteps, the settling of a new body into position. Then silence. She didn't sleep. Sleep felt dangerous, like something that would leave her vulnerable to dreams or memories or hope. Just before dawn, she heard footsteps. Not the guard. Different, heavier, purposeful. The hide flap pulled back. Red Hawk stood in the doorway, backlit by the pre-dawn gray. He still didn't look at her. Even now, alone, he kept his eyes on some fixed point above her head. "I need to know something," he said. She waited. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" The question caught her off guard. In 3 years, he had never asked. He had accused, condemned, and ignored. Never asked. "Would it have mattered?" she said. "Answer the question." "You answer one first," she countered. "Why did you change routes?" His jaw tightened. "We saw Bluecoat scouts near Three Sisters Canyon the evening before the raid. I made the call to use the secondary route. And who did you tell?" "The raiding party." "Just the raiding party?" "Yes." "Then Stonehand is right," she said. "I couldn't have told the Bluecoats about Twin Springs. I didn't know about Twin Springs. I was here in camp exactly where I've been for 3 years. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher. "Then how did they know?" "You're the warrior," she said. "You tell me." She watched him process it. She could almost see the memories reshuffling in his mind, the story he had told himself for 3 years, starting to crack. His hands flexed at his sides. "There was a moment," he said slowly. "During the route change, we stopped at a ridge. I saw movement in the valley below. It might have been riders. I thought they were just travelers, not soldiers. I didn't report it." "Did anyone else see them?" "No. I was scouting ahead." His voice dropped. "I should have reported it. I should have called off the raid, but you didn't." "No. I thought I could handle it. I thought I knew better." He paused. "And then the ambush happened, and 4 good men died because I was arrogant enough to think I could improvise strategy in enemy territory." There it was, the truth, laid bare in the gray light of dawn. She watched him standing there, this man who had carried the weight of 4 deaths and laid it on her shoulders because it was easier than carrying it himself. "So, you blamed me," she said quietly. "I blamed the outsider," he corrected. "The one who didn't belong. The one who would be believed as a traitor because she was white. Because she came from the fort. Because it was easier to believe she betrayed us than to believe I made a catastrophic mistake. And I let you? Why?" She finally met his eyes, forced him to look at her. He flinched, actually flinched as if her gaze carried physical weight. "Because you were being groomed for leadership," she said. "Because the tribe needed you whole, not broken by guilt. Because 4 men were already dead, and destroying you wouldn't bring them back. Because I was already an outsider. My silence cost me nothing the tribe hadn't already taken." He stared at her, really looked at her for the first time in 3 years. She saw the moment the full weight of it hit him, what she had done, what she had sacrificed, what he had let her sacrifice. "You protected me," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I protected the tribe." "No." He shook his head slowly. "You protected me, and I was too much of a coward to question why a supposed traitor never defended herself. Too much of a coward to ask why the facts didn't align. Too much of a coward to do anything but believe the story that let me sleep at night." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know." "Liar." His eyes sharpened. "Excuse me?" "You know exactly what you're going to do," she said. "You're going to go back to the council. You're going to deflect Stonehand's questions. You're going to reframe the evidence in a way that protects your reputation, and you're going to exile me at dawn just like you said, because that's what leaders do. They survive." "That's not—" "Isn't it?" she interrupted. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're planning to stand in front of the council and confess that you made a mistake 3 years ago, that you got 4 warriors killed because you didn't report suspicious movement, that you blamed an innocent woman because it was easier than admitting your own failure. Tell me you're going to do that." He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because they both knew she was right. She leaned back against the wall. "Go away, Red Hawk. I'm tired of watching you not look at me." He stood there for a moment longer, silhouetted in the doorway, a man caught between honor and survival. Then he turned and left. The guard resumed his position. The sun began to rise, and the girl waited for the council to reconvene. Midday came with a heat that shimmered off the ground in waves. The council circle reformed. The elders took their positions. Warriors gathered. The girl was brought forward, hands still bound, and placed in the center. Red Hawk stood at the edge of the circle, and this time, when Broken Bow called him forward, something was different. His posture, his expression, the set of his shoulders. She recognized it immediately because she had seen it on the faces of warriors preparing for battle. He had made a choice. "Red Hawk," Broken Bow began. "Stonehand raised questions yesterday about the logic of the accusation. We wish to hear your response." Red Hawk stepped into the circle. He walked to the center, to where the cold fire pit sat. He stood there for a long moment, looking down at the ashes. When he spoke, his voice carried across the gathered crowd with absolute clarity. "Stonehand is correct," he said. "The facts don't align." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The girl's heart stuttered. "No, don't do this. The ambush happened at Twin Springs, not at Three Sisters Canyon," Red Hawk continued. "The girl could not have known about Twin Springs. She was in camp when we departed, and the decision to change routes was made 2 days into the journey. There is no possible way she could have communicated that information to the Bluecoats." Broken Bow leaned forward. Then why did you accuse her? Red Hawk's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Because I needed someone to blame. Because I couldn't face what I had done. What did you do? I saw riders the evening before the raid, Red Hawk said, his voice steady but strained. I was scouting ahead. I saw movement in the valley below Twin Springs. It could have been Bluecoat scouts. It probably was Bluecoat scouts. But I was young, I was arrogant, I thought I could handle any threat, so I didn't report it to the raid leader. I didn't call for a reassessment, I just continued. The silence was absolute. Not even the wind moved. The next morning we rode into the ambush, Red Hawk said. The Bluecoats were positioned exactly where those riders had been. They were waiting, and 4 of our warriors died because I didn't report what I saw, because I thought I knew better, because I was too proud to admit I might be wrong. His voice cracked, just slightly on the last word. He steadied himself. When I came back to camp, covered in their blood, everyone asked me what happened. And I told them the Bluecoats knew our position, which was true. But when they asked how, I looked for an answer that wouldn't destroy me. And I found one. The white girl. The outsider. The one who came from the fort. It was easy to believe she had betrayed us. It made sense. It protected me. Broken Bow's face was unreadable. And she never defended herself. No, Red Hawk said, she never did, and I didn't ask why, because asking why would have meant confronting the truth. He finally turned to look at her, fully, directly. For the first time in 3 years, he held her gaze. She let me blame her, he said. She stayed silent while I condemned her. She took the punishment for my failure, and she did it because she understood something I didn't. That the tribe needed me whole, not broken by guilt. That my value as a future leader outweighed her value as an outsider. That sometimes survival requires sacrifice. And you let her make that sacrifice, Stonehand said, his scarred voice cutting across the circle. I did, Red Hawk admitted, because I was a coward who cared more about my reputation than the truth. The word hung in the air. Coward. No warrior used that word about himself unless he meant it. What do you propose now? Broken Bow asked. I propose the truth, Red Hawk said. The girl is innocent. The deaths of those 4 warriors are my responsibility. I am the one who should face judgment. No, the girl said. Every head turned to her. She struggled to her feet, wrists still bound behind her. No, she repeated. This is exactly what I tried to prevent. You don't get to prevent the truth, Red Hawk said. The truth? She laughed, bitter and sharp. The truth serves no one. You think confessing makes you noble? You think destroying yourself fixes what happened? 4 men are still dead. My silence didn't kill them. Your confession won't bring them back. All you're doing is trading one kind of cowardice for another. That's not... It is, she interrupted. 3 years ago, you were too cowardly to face your mistake. Now you're too cowardly to live with the guilt. This isn't about honor. This is about you wanting to feel better. About you wanting redemption. Well, you don't get it. Not from me. Not from them. You want truth? Here's truth. You're going to be chief one day. And when you are, you're going to face 100 decisions harder than the one you faced at Twin Springs. You're going to make mistakes. People are going to die. And if you can't learn to carry that weight without destroying yourself, you'll be worse than useless. The silence that followed was suffocating. Red Hawk stared at her like she had struck him. She's right, Stonehand said quietly. Broken Bow nodded slowly. Wisdom comes from unexpected places. "So what happens now?" someone asked from the crowd. Broken Bow looked at Red Hawk, then at the girl, then at the council members flanking him. "The girl is innocent of betrayal," he declared. "She will be freed. Her bindings will be removed. She will be given a place in this tribe with full honor." The girl's knees nearly buckled. She hadn't expected that, hadn't dared to hope. "As for Red Hawk," Broken Bow continued, "he has confessed to a failure of judgment that cost lives, but he has also shown the courage to speak truth when silence would have been easier. This council recognizes both the failure and the courage. He will remain in his position, but he will carry the memory of those 4 warriors with him for the rest of his days. And he will lead, knowing that leadership is not about being perfect. It is about being honest when you fail. And learning from those who are willing to sacrifice in silence," Stonehand added, looking at the girl. "A warrior came forward and cut her bindings. Her wrists ached as blood flow returned. She rubbed them slowly, processing the fact that she was free, actually free." Red Hawk approached her, close enough to speak without the whole circle hearing. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Just be better." "I will." "Prove it," he nodded. "I will." She believed him, not because he had earned it, but because she saw in his eyes the same thing she had seen in the mirror for 3 years. The weight of carrying a truth too heavy for one person. The cost of silence. The burden of sacrifice. He wasn't the same man who had refused to look at her. And she wasn't the same woman who had knelt in the dust expecting exile. They had both been broken by the same lie. Maybe that meant they could both be rebuilt by the same truth. The council dispersed. Warriors drifted away. The girl stood in the center of the circle, free, vindicated, and strangely empty. 3 years of silence ended. 3 years of bearing false guilt lifted. 3 years of isolation over, and all she felt was tired. Stonehand approached as she stood there. "You could have spoken up years ago," he said, his scarred voice gentle. "I know." "Why didn't you?" She looked at the old warrior, at the scars that mapped his skin, the battles that had carved themselves into his flesh. "Because some truths cost more than lies, and I decided that cost was mine to pay. That kind of thinking makes you either very wise or very foolish. Maybe both." He smiled, a rare sight. "Maybe both," he agreed. "But it also makes you Comanche. Welcome home." She watched him walk away. Welcome home. The words settled in her chest, warm and strange. She had lived among these people for years, but she had never been one of them. She had been the outsider, the traitor, the girl who didn't belong. Now she belonged. It felt uncomfortable, like wearing new boots that hadn't been broken in yet, but also right, like something she had been walking toward without realizing it. Red Hawk appeared beside her. They stood together in the empty circle, not quite looking at each other, not quite looking away. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to tell me the truth." "I've been telling you the truth for 3 years," she said. "You just weren't listening. I'm listening now. Ask." "Why did you really stay silent?" he said. "Not the reason you told the council, the real reason." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because I knew what it felt like to make a mistake that got people killed. My brother died because I didn't listen when he told me not to wander near the river. I was 7. He was 12. He drowned pulling me out. So when you came back from that raid, covered in blood, looking for someone to blame, I recognized the look in your eyes. I've carried it myself. And I thought, maybe I could carry it for you too. Maybe that's what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself." Red Hawk was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I'm sorry. For all of it." "I know." "That's not enough." "No," she agreed. "But it's a start." They stood there as the sun climbed higher, two people bound by silence and sacrifice and the slow, painful work of rebuilding trust from ruins. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just two people choosing to stand in the same circle and face the truth together. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Because here's what they both learned in that moment. Pride doesn't just distort memory. It distorts the future. It makes you believe that protecting your reputation is more important than protecting the truth. That survival means hiding your failures instead of learning from them. That leadership is about being right instead of being honest. Red Hawk had spent 3 years believing a lie because the truth was too expensive. And the girl had spent 3 years paying that price because she understood something he didn't. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is carry someone else's burden in silence. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to survive the weight. The Comanche had a saying, "The warrior who never falls, never learns to stand." Red Hawk had fallen, hard, and the girl had been the ground that caught him. Now they both had to figure out how to stand. It wouldn't be easy. The tribe would remember. Warriors would whisper. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild overnight. But they would try. Because that's what it meant to be Comanche. You fell. You stood. You kept walking. And sometimes, if you were lucky, someone walked beside you. As they left the circle together, Red Hawk finally spoke the words he should have said 3 years ago. "I should have asked what happened." "Yes," she said. "You should have. I won't make that mistake again." "Good, because next time I won't stay silent." He glanced at her, and for the first time since the whole ordeal began, she saw the ghost of a smile. "I believe you." "You should." They walked back to camp side by side, not quite friends, not quite strangers, just two people learning what it meant to live with truth instead of comfort. The sun beat down on the hard earth. The wind carried dust across the plains. And somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, its voice sharp and clear against the endless sky. Life went on. The tribe moved with the seasons. Red Hawk rose to leadership, carrying the weight of his mistake like a scar that wouldn't fade. The girl found her place among the people who had once called her traitor, and Stonehand watched them both with knowing eyes, understanding that the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons, they're fought with words, with silence, with the courage to admit when you're wrong. Years later, when Red Hawk became chief, his first act was to establish a new council law. No judgment could be rendered without first asking the accused to speak. No accusation could stand without evidence that aligned with facts. No leader could condemn without first confronting their own role in the outcome. He called it the law of questions. The tribe called it wisdom. The girl called it too late. But she voted for it anyway. Because that's what it means to move forward. You carry the past, you learn from it, you build something better. You don't erase the mistakes. You don't pretend they didn't happen. You just refuse to let them define what comes next. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the fire burned low and the stories began, someone would ask about the white girl who was once called traitor, about the warrior who learned to ask questions, about the silence that cost everything and nothing at all, and Red Hawk would tell the story, not the version that made him look good, the real version, the one where he failed, where she sacrificed, where truth came at a price both of them paid. Because that's what leaders do. They tell the hard stories. They admit the failures. They honor the people who saved them from themselves. and they never, ever stop looking someone in the eye when they speak. Now here's something worth thinking about. How many times have you believed a story simply because it was easier than questioning it? How many times have you let someone carry blame that wasn't theirs because confronting the truth meant confronting yourself? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. We tell these stories not to entertain, though we hope they do that too. We tell them because they force us to examine the distance between what we believe and what's true, between what's comfortable and what's right, between the person we want to be and the person we actually are. If this story made you think about the cost of pride and the value of truth, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Not because we need the numbers, though we appreciate every single one, but because these stories matter. Because the questions they raise deserve to be answered. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that silence can be strength, that mistakes don't define you, and that the hardest thing you'll ever do is admit when you're wrong. Leave a comment. Tell me, would you have the courage to confess your mistake in front of your entire community? Or would you have stayed silent like the girl, carrying someone else's burden to protect them? There's no wrong answer. Just your truth. And truth, as painful as it is always worth speaking. Subscribe. Share. Join this community of people who believe that stories should challenge us, not just comfort us. Who understand that real courage isn't about being fearless. It's about facing the truth even when it destroys you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for understanding that sometimes the most powerful story is the one that makes you uncomfortable. Now go think about the lies you've believed, the truths you've avoided, the questions you've refused to ask, and maybe, just maybe, find the courage to look someone in the eye and admit you were wrong. That's where real leadership begins.